Hello and welcome to Stocks Down Under. My name is Stuart Roberts and I'm one of the co-founders of our service. And joining me from Manukau in South Island, New Zealand on the afternoon of Thursday, the 13th of February 2025 is Mr. Jason Beckton, who's the CEO of Prospech, ASX PRS. Jason, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Stuart. Thank you for having me.
It's not Prospech that's taken over to New Zealand, although you're interested in some of the projects that are available now that the adults are back in charge in New Zealand.
Yeah, that's right. There's, the long term, when I've got personal investments here, but we've been looking at mid-gold properties here, and we'll update the market in due course, not for Prospech, but just one of the parallel companies out of the office in Sydney.
Okay, and that office is interesting. You've worked with characters like Norm Seckold, Peter Nightingale, Tom Mann in a variety of projects over the years. The name Bolnisi Gold will many people will recognise as a huge win in the silver space with a big mine in Mexico, which I understand you were an engineer on at the time.
Oh yeah, no. So I was the manager of the project as GEO, and the late Ken Phillips gave me a chance at my first role over there. Ken was famous for Bougainville, but I think duly credited as well at Palmarejo. We went from one rig to 11 while I was there, so it was certainly the advent of grey hair, but also a good experience and employing a lot of people and pushing projects through the hoops. And we like that style of mineralisation, gold epithermal, which is why this company, Prospech, has that similar asset in Slovakia, which is what brought us to the EU. But then as a segue, I guess, into Finland and the rare earths, we were attracted to the brownfields nature of the asset here and eventually took that on. I guess our wheelhouse, just not to ramble on, but about the philosophy of the group is brownfields. We're not BHP. We don't have the exploration capabilities for large belts in greenfields work. We work on old mines and push them through the resource hoops and hopefully reserve hoops.
Right. Let's talk about the brownfields that's potentially going to get a whole lot of people excited. Up in Finland, Finland's a very mining-friendly country, so I've learned from various sources. And you've picked up ground near the old Korsnas lead mine that Outokumpu used to work up until the early 70s, late 50s to early 70s. Quite a rich lead deposit. Turns out there was a heck of a lot of rare earths associated with that lead that Outokumpu never really paid much attention to because rare earths weren't a thing back in the 70s. It certainly is a thing here in 2025. And you were able to go peg that ground with one of the most advanced administration systems for the resources sector in the entire world, completely electronic, almost as good as Western Australia.
Yeah, no, that's right, Stuart. And I think it was important you highlighted it was a lead mine, but also the previous operators, Outokumpu, they were aware of the rare earths, of course, but in the late 60s, early 70s, it was a different price dynamic. So they quantified them, but didn't do much assaying for them. They did some sporadic academic work on the rare earths. They were focused on a lead, what's called underground miners call it a lead plum or a plum of metal. But what they kept doing, they drilled over close to 500 drill holes trying to find another plum. And we all know that can be fairly unrewarding in the base metal space. What they kept doing was defining these planar, much, much earlier formed books, if you like, of rare earths, which are stacked and dipped about 50 degrees. There's 7 of them at least, maybe more. 7 we know of, so I don't want to be too speculative. But what they did for us really was, drill out most of the area to the north that needs work, and there's some other pockets we're drilling at the moment, or in the past, and we'll drill shortly. And they managed to really define the resource. The resource that we put out for over 7 million tonnes at over 1% in December was 97% of Outokumpu's drilling in the 60s and 70s. We assayed it all, of course, so they're modern assays. But the key point I want to make with shareholders and potential shareholders is this thing was drilled out for us to a large extent. We want to grow it with more drilling. No doubt that'll happen. In the exploration target, you can see that's a bit over, not quite double the fairly conservative resource estimate, so that'll happen. But we have a method which I've used in the past in southern Chile, drill some important modern drill holes close to the existing old drill holes, replicate those, and then rehabilitate those old holes geologically, if you like, and with modern assaying into a resource. But anyway, I'll give the listeners a break from my nasal monotone. Back to you, Stuart.
Um, Here in Australia, we're used to seeing new rare earths plays. There's been a few in Brazil that have hit the streets in the last couple of years, and we at Stocks Down Under at Pitt Street Research have done some work on some of those. What's interesting about your project is we're sitting in the middle of the EU at a time when they're very concerned to get independence with their critical mineral endowment. You've got one of the grades that the Brazilian developers would kill for. Like they're having a couple of thousand
roughly, the chalk mandarins will come after me, but we're roughly 5 times the grade of most of those Brazilian assets,
right,
in rare earths, and of course we're a tenth the grade, the tons. But my view is that as a miner in the past and an investor for the last 30 years on my personal account, you want to move as least amount of Finland as possible underground to make the rare earths. So we are a bona fide chalk resource almost instantly in 18 months. It's very fast. That I think eventually will aim to increase that. I don't want to say by what quantum, but basically should look for double figures very soon on the resource estimates. And we also have importantly, and this is what was facilitated in the very cold month of February by our exec director, John Levings, who's a geologist, but also a resource and geometallurgist. He's hired an expert, and we're pushing through the 2 or 3 work programs on the metallurgy, because we don't want to be flippant about the fact that this was a lead mine, lead processing plant, and that's well understood. They did some test work, but we need to make sure the resource can be a reserve, which of course involves test work.
Yes. Now, a lot of people tend to think that this is where rare earths projects can fall apart. Because in China, up until recently, the source of most of the world's rare earths processing technology is state secret. You can go to a concentration camp for a long time if you try and steal that stuff. As I talk to people in rare earths, they're saying, well, we know enough about this stuff from academic work outside of China to be able to quickly apply what we know to the local setting. How is this stuff keeping you awake at night, worrying about the? No,
not really. I mean, the Americans. The state secret was that they copied Mountain Pass. Most of the processing was invented by excellent chemical engineers and chemists in the United States, and They were prematurely stopped by overzealous Californian environmental regulations in the 90s. That was a mistake.
Right.
And so now they're starting up again, but they've lost the jump. The main thing is the processing technology is not proprietary. We can rely on the vast bank of knowledge in Finland itself, because they've done a lot of test work on other EU assets. I'm not a metallurgist. And that's why we got an EU grant recently, which is very unusual. It's close to 700,000 Aussie in non-dilutionary cash from Brussels, mainly because of the fact that we agreed we would apply the vast bulk of that money to test work. Because geologically, I'm relaxed without being arrogant. You can see the background. The reason I use this slide as a background, it's the old Korsnas pit. You can see the face of the pit. It's about 20 metres thick in the pit. And that's sort of the intercepts. It's glistening lead there, but there's rare earths all through that of over 1%, probably 2% in this part of the pit. The point is, that's what we just released to the market on the 7th of February. We'll release a lot more results like that. It's a planar tabular body that now the EU are investing in. And of course, there's challenges, not to be over the top about the simplicity. But on my personal account, that's what I look for, simplicity.
Right.
And for me, yes, metallurgical test work, of course, will do it. And I'll hold on with my fingernails trying to understand it. But at this stage, it's mainly phosphates, which float quite easily. There's allanite as well, which is a significant high-grade component. That needs more work because that's a silicate.
Right.
But we're getting good support from GTK, who are a government testing body, GTK Mintech specifically in Outokumpu, which the guys visited a fortnight ago.
Right. So it's a reasonable bet that something very interesting is going to come out of Korsnas over time.
In 2 weeks, I think we'll have more drill results shortly, and metallurgy in a similar time span. So we're not preying on the patience of investors to wait months and things like this. We're still in the sexy stage of, yes, we've got the resource out, but that resource is going to grow. But in parallel, there'll be three things that come out: more drill results, a resource growth comment. That'll be a few months, I guess, 8 weeks, probably, maybe 6. But importantly, there'll be short-term news on the metallurgy progress. We're just pushing the government guys now to publish some of that information.
Right. I'll take you back to a comment you made earlier. You spent a bit of time in southern Chile kicking around in the Maricumba gold belt that country is famous for. And you said in many cases there you've got old holes and new, and matching them up then allows you to move quickly towards a decent sized resource estimate. What did you learn in that setting that you're now applying here?
Well, first you have to you have to be sympathetic, I guess, to the resource geologists, because they don't like being strong-armed. I am one. I did my first resource in 1998.
Right.
But what you have to assure them is there's modern information mixed with it. So that was the purpose of the spending the shareholders support in August of the 6 holes, not just metallurgical work, which has been used for right now, but assays as well. So that's why I personally and another geologist from Slovakia cut the core to make sure the half core went for metallurgy, quarter core went for assay. That rehabilitated, if you like, the assays on what is already high detailed logging of the geology. So one of the things that's maybe it doesn't appeal to people, but it's very important from a time burn or cash burn for us, is they already logged the geology perfectly in the core. So we haven't had to relog the holes. I don't want people to think we're doing a PhD on these core.
Right.
The 600 odd samples that are still due from the lab that we'll be reporting on shortly, they were quickly selected visually and then marked out and cut, and that's it, because it's already been logged. That's all been entered by excellent consultant we use in Indonesia, and it's all in this database. And therefore, the resource estimate improvements or upgrades are iterative, if you like. We're not going to reinvent the wheel. We'll put the new information in. We want to get those 600 holes in. And what happened in Chile, that was in fact in Patagonia with EMR Capital, where I worked down at Red Hill, which is still a project, I believe, in 29 metals. In that case, again, it was a fraction of the drilling that rehabilitated an old copper sulfide deposit. In that case, again, low nugget.
Right.
I don't think you can use old assays in any example, and we never have. We've always used modern assays for every Korsnas. Every Korsnas interval is a modern assay since 2023 by us. It's just the geology that we use.
Right.
Whereas the case in Chile, because it was copper, relatively low nugget, we were allowed to use the old copper numbers. And here, though, I want to stress we're not using any old rare earth assays. We're just using the core. That was, importantly, and this, I only ever remember one thing from a briefing. Importantly, this core was unsampled because they looked at the core, like when I was a kid geologist in Broken Hill, you don't see lead or zinc, you don't cut it.
Right. I guess, yeah, of course.
So they left the whole core there. I couldn't believe it in April 2023 when we first looked at it. I was like, this is a sitting duck. Right. I just need to cut the rare earth zones.
Right. You have an exciting 12 months ahead of you, given where you're starting with this thing. This is great.
Yeah, I mean, we've still got a lot of old core to cut, to the chagrin of the government core cutter people in the facility. But we actually choked the system. It was sort of, they'd never seen so much core, so we had to subcontract and send half the core to the excellent people at Palsatec up in Kami in northern Finland and to get through it faster. But yeah, that's basically, I like projects that are simple. There's enough complexity in these businesses as it is. So yeah, just cut every single meter we can find, drill some of it ourselves with our own shareholders' money, and in parallel push the metallurgy through the gates.
Okay. I want to talk briefly about the projects that took you public. You've got a really interesting project, and I got to read twice here because Slovakia is not a country I know much about. Hodrusa Hambre, I think southern Slovakia, and Slovakia is a old mining jurisdiction from way back. Those tall mountains between it and Germany. You talked to me before we pressed the button about a decent sized vein system you're turning up there, but chasing those veins tend to be expensive for a company of your size. What's your plans at this project?
So you're right. That's that asset which I heard about at a conference in Chile in I think 2012, where a government geologist said, the Slovak government geologist on yet another junket said, "Oh, we've got all these high grade silver gold veins, but you wouldn't be interested in that." because at the time I was with a large porphyry copper company, Chinalco, but I just said, look, let me know. And in fact, I like the asset so much, I quit my long-term job with the Chinese and we formed a new company with Peter Nightingale and Tom to explore these epithermal gold silver systems. Importantly, because you're in the EU and the EEC and, there's concerns about cyanide there, these types of systems like we see in Australia and Chile, they don't need cyanide. They just go process straight to float. And then we're adjacent to a producing mine. I think that's important for all juniors not to be a exploring leader in some new terrain. You leave that for the larger entities.
Right.
We like reducing risk for shareholders, and in this case, we picked up ground adjacent to a producing mine. We every fortnight send a concentrate to Hoboken in Belgium, where it's produced into doré bars. So we see a business there in terms of drilling up a resource again, gold, silver. Certainly we overpegged, well, not overpegged, we dominate, if you like, the epithermal gold story there. We avoided some projects that others are looking at for community reasons, but you have a supportive mining industry in that part of the world. We haven't had a single issue with permitting. A workforce who speak perfect English. Because you're in Schengen EU, they can transfer across to Finland. So I don't want shareholders to think we're building these little empires everywhere. We've got one operational team and we drill one place at a time. So as it is in Finland, we have one accountant and one manager who works in the buildings behind me. And we have no geologists at the moment because that's covered by our Slovak team.
Right. It's an exciting suite of projects across Finland and Slovakia. At the moment, it doesn't cost much for me to buy the whole of Prospech, and unfortunately cut off a lot of upside that's coming. So I'm sure you won't accept my offer to buy the company for 10 million because it's clearly worth a lot more than that, given what you've just turned up.
Well, I think that's excellent phrase. I mean, sadly, we're for sale between 10 and 4 p.m. Monday to Friday on the market.
Right, of course.
And but we, I don't look at the bid and the ask every day. I've been an MD on the ASX since 2007. And what I recommend all new MDs, don't look at the blog sites of the stocks,
yes,
just, respected media, but also B, the market decides the value. Our results were fair to middling, I guess, in Slovakia, to be honest, and so shareholders took a view on that. But, however, things have rebounded because of the low risk nature of what we're doing now in Finland. And the management of the asset is very low cost to maintain, both in Slovakia and in Finland. And so we're very respectful with shareholders' money.
Yeah.
And to that end, sure, we'd like to see a high valuation of the company, but I don't speculate on price. That's up to the market.
Not only that, rare earths are coming back from the lows of last year. We've seen the new Trump administration obviously is paying attention because they were talking about the rare earths endowment of Ukraine to help support the war effort there. Trump's probably aware of the rare earth potential of southern Greenland in those discussions as well. And of course, Mountain Pass is the first thing we talk about when we talk about rare earths. So it feels to me like this thesis of non-Chinese supply chains for rare earths and encouragement of new developments, particularly in the EU in your case, that's a potent combination for 2025.
Oh, I think so. I think our product is excellent because right now the EU imports 100% of its heavy rare earths from China.
Right.
And 97% of its light rare earths. So those numbers are sort of ridiculous. It's like they're the only ones who make sheep or whatever, like I'm here in New Zealand. But the point is there's an absolute monopoly when you control that much of a business. And what they are trying to do is break a monopoly, hence the funding from the EU, which we received. Of course, we'll contribute to that in a small way, but maybe in a major way. There's been grants both in the EU and Australia to build facilities, but that they don't have any feed. So we're solving a problem we're not going to build a processing plant. We're not engineers.
Right.
All we'll build is I should say we're going to build a small float plant probably. And that will then be shipped off like the gold concept in Slovakia. We don't want to build a large chemistry set. The good thing about the metallurgy probably at this asset, I hasten to say probably, it leans itself towards simple flotation, which as people know in the base metal space, it has been invented in 1909. It's quite a simple process.
Right. Right.
So we are feeling a need to go back to your geopolitical comments. There's no, if you like, lack of interest from the Finnish government, including other assets in the north that are controlled by the government, such as the Sockley mine. And the very cooperative nature of things there means they do want to see it succeed. Of course, like all projects, it has its work to be done. But yeah, you can't think of a better macro supporting environment for the asset. We're not in a difficult geopolitical country where the asset will be taken from us. You're in, well, first world. I think Finland's zero world. Everything works there perfectly.
I checked on that for you. We'll close in a second on this one. Many people will have encountered the name Sanna Marin a couple of years ago. From one of the left-wing parties, youngest prime minister in the world. I don't think she was even 40. Her party were defeated in the 2023 election. The new prime minister is Petteri Orpo of the main centre-right party. So you've got a business-friendly government coming over an already business-friendly jurisdiction with a long mining history. That's got to work in your favour as well.
Yeah, it was quite a sweeping defeat, actually, like we've seen here in New Zealand as well, in that sort of sense. And it was mainly to do with unemployment. People want to see progressive business within the environmental regulation.
Right.
Because the good thing about, like all first world jurisdictions, you don't change your administration in terms of mining department, environmental department, etc. But they certainly are aware of the fact that there's an imperative to do constructive things within the law. So luckily, we have a good administrative team there. However, yeah, I mean, I have a little rule when you work in offshore locations, you don't talk politics there, but I can talk it here. Certainly, yeah, we haven't seen a single, what's the point, issue. In fact, the opposite. The municipality, for example, which is run by an economist lady, has given us full access. We recently drilled out the resource or exploration target, it's not quite JORC yet, of the tailings dam of processed rare earths, which ran about 0.5%, which we have published. And that went from zero to, I'm saying, right, there's a volume there. It's got 50 years worth of regrown trees on it. What the municipality did on our behalf was remove the trees and pulp them for their heating systems. Then our drill contractors put water to make sure the ice was the correct thickness for the drill rig. This is February last. And that was only a 4-week job. I've never seen anything like that.
That's efficient local government if there ever was.
I wasn't even there. Like John Levings ran it. And in fact, I said, Mark, to one of our Finnish subsidiary directors, like went so smoothly. And he said, actually, because I got a sense of humour, he said, that's because you weren't here. So it really is, I don't want to say easy, but an efficient place to work.
Okay. On that point, we'll go back and do a bit more work. Jason Beckton, well done on what you and your colleagues have achieved with Prospech in Finland and earlier in Slovakia. It's going to be a great 2025, so keep up the good work.
Thank you. I appreciate your interest, Stuart.